Since their beginnings in the 1830s, the railways of London have seen many changes. Throughout the years, the system has expanded and contracted to suit the needs of the travelling public, and this has resulted in the opening and closing of numerous passenger stations. Perhaps the most potent symbol of London's lost railway heritage is the famous Euston Arch, completed to the design of Philip Hardwick for the London and Birmingham Railway in 1837, and sadly demolished in 1962 when the station was being rebuilt. The enormous task of rebuilding was completed within the decade, and the new station was officially opened by Her Majesty the Queen on the 14th of October 1968. Here we see film of the work progressing, with parts of the old building still very much in evidence. In the prelude to electrification, mainline services were latterly worked by diesel traction, as seen here with English Electric Type 4, number D326, on an express banked out by one of Willesden's standard Class 2 260s. One of the main suburban stations on the line from Euston is Harrow and Willesden, and until 1952 this is where passengers would change for the Stanmore branch. The only intermediate station on the line was situated at Belmont, and here we see scenes taken in 1952 with motive power provided by Fowler 262 tank number 40010, which was then shedded at Watford. Here she is entering Belmont with a train for Harrow. And now a glimpse of the same engine leaving Stanmore on a similar duty. The branch retained an almost rural air, but suburban housing was never that far away, as can be seen here. Stanmore Terminus opened in December 1890 and was designed to resemble a church in order to appease the local council. It was renamed Stanmore Village in 1950, but closed just 2 years later. After 1952, passenger services terminated at Belmont, leaving the line beyond for freight traffic only. Here we see the old passenger station, complete with church-like spire, as it appeared in 1964. The various heraldic devices incorporated into the ironwork relate to the Gordon family, one of whom, a local hotelier, was largely responsible for the line being built. The station remained more or less intact, and there was even an old waiting room seat on the platform, although its origins were clearly not London North Western. By 1964, all activity at Stanmore Village, such as it was, centred around the adjoining goods shed. With their leafy surroundings and sleepy atmosphere, it's difficult to believe that these scenes were filmed within Greater London. Here we see the branch freight, powered by one of William Stanier's Black 5 460s, shunting in the yard. Staff are seen chatting beside an 8F280. Locomotives such as this and Black Fives were surely overpowered for work of this nature, but in its final days they were frequent visitors to the line. Having completed its shunting, the Black Five is ready to leave and is soon heading back towards Harrow. Freight traffic to Stanmore finished soon after this film was taken. Belmont remained as the passenger terminus of the line until October 1964, when it was closed as a result of the infamous Beeching Axe. This is a general view of the station on its last day, with various protests against the closure prominently displayed. The last train was formed of a two-car Park Royal DMU and is seen here at Belmont complete with a wreath displaying the word Axe, which had been placed there by the manageress of the station bookstall. Just one final journey up the branch, then the DMU terminated at Harrow, with its distinctive station clock tower on the right. After arrival, the photographer recorded some of the farewell notices displayed on the unit, together with the destination blind. Has someone been messing about, or is this really a through working from Belmont to Crewe? The London of today, with its high-rise developments, is vastly different from that of 3 decades ago. This is Cannon Street Station as it is now. And here it is, having its war-damaged overall roof removed in 1958. At nearby Blackfriars, trams are seen passing the entrance to the underground station, itself badly damaged in the Blitz. On the subject of the Second World War, this is Regis House near London Bridge, an office block with a most unusual basement. Down the stairs could be found the remains of the old King William Street station, opened by the City and South London Railway in 1890, but abandoned in 1900 when the line was extended northwards. It was converted into an air raid shelter shortly after the outbreak of hostilities, but some of the original tiling remains. This diagram shows how the number of shelterers in the old station was increased by the addition of a second floor. These are the stairs built to serve this, and here we see the top floor with the white station tiling prominent above. Although alterations made at the time are very prominent, reminders of the former station can still be seen. When this film was taken, a number of period posters remained, such as this Careless Talk Costs Lives classic by the cartoonist Fougas. Looking down a passageway with the old tunnel wall to the left, we eventually find what appears to be a serving hatch, no doubt used for providing all-important cups of tea as the relentless evil bombardment continued overhead. Of course, toilets were necessary, and here we see a row of cubicles as recognisable today as they were in the war years. Despite its conversion to an air raid shelter, there are still plenty of reminders that this was once a railway. The now demolished Regis House is to the left of this recent film and makes an interesting comparison with the same scene as it appeared during the Blitz, with commuters carrying on their daily lives despite the unbelievable carnage of the air raids. This book by Peter Bancroft tells the complete story of the station and subsequent shelter and makes for fascinating reading. It is illustrated with a number of diagrams and photographs such as these, and should be on the shelves of all with an interest in London's railways. With a final look at the abandoned tunnel beneath the Thames, complete with its stalactites, we move from King William Street to another disused underground station. The present Central Line premises at White City only date from 1947, although there has been a station serving the district since 1908. The original establishment was situated a little to the south and was named Wood Lane. It is an interesting place with platforms above and below ground and deserves a study in its own right. When this film was taken in the early 1970s, parts of the derelict station were still clearly visible, although nature was doing its best to hide them. One of the fences had been trodden down, and vandals could seemingly roam at will. This was soon rectified, however. In the eerie darkness below ground, things remained much as they did at the time of closure, even down to enamel nameboards and period posters. Here, a train bound for Epping briefly dispels the gloom as it passes the erstwhile Platform 3 on its journey to suburban Essex. With a view of the old CLR power station and LT car sheds, we leave Wood Lane and head back to central London for a look at the Kingsway tram subway. This opened in 1906 with the service of single-deck cars, but was enlarged to take double-deckers in 1931. The tracks, which can still be seen today, descended on a steep gradient into the tunnel. Trams would pass under the junction of High Holborn and Kingsway and arrive at Holborn Station. As can be seen, there are still substantial remains of this, including the tiled walls and stairway, although the entrance at street level, opposite Holborn Underground Station, disappeared in the early 1970s. The other station in the subway was situated at Aldwych, but this disappeared when the southernmost section was converted into the Strand Underpass in 1964. We leave the Kingsway subway with scenes of trams at Southampton Row and the Holborn Station entrance before closure in 1952. This is the former London Chatham and Dover Bridge at Ludgate Hill, demolished at the beginning of the 1990s in connection with the closure of Holborn Viaduct and the reintroduction of services through the Snow Hill Tunnel. Here we see a train of EPB stock approaching Holborn Viaduct and passing the former junction with the line to Farringdon, which by this time had become overgrown and derelict. Down below, in the gloom of the tunnel, could still be seen the erstwhile platforms of Snow Hill Station, opened in 1874 and renamed Holborn Viaduct Low Level in 1912, just 4 years before closure. There was even the remains of a long-abandoned platform seat in an alcove, together with other reminders of the past. Bits of signalling equipment were still lying around, having been dismantled after the last goods train trundled through in the late 1960s, leaving the tunnel to slumber until services resumed many years later. Not long before rebuilding commenced, we see a view from the tunnel looking towards Farringdon as a train from Moorgate passes by. The City Widen lines, now used only by electric trains, once echoed to the sounds of steam. These wonderfully evocative shots show Gresley N2-062 tanks arriving at Aldersgate and Barbican Station in the early 1950s, before the war-damaged overall roof was removed. Now we see one of Sir Henry Fowler's condensing 262 tanks number 40022 of Kentish Town Shed, arriving and departing from Farringdon with a train from Moorgate. We now move to Moorgate to witness a gloriously smoky departure of a grimy N2 with a GN line suburban train. As can be seen, Moorgate station, like so much of the city, suffered at the hands of Hitler's Luftwaffe. Until the 1960s, one of the entrances still carried the title Metropolitan Railway. King's Cross Station is of course still with us, although the Deltics have now been consigned to history. Alongside the main line, until 1977, stood the single platform of York Road Station, used by southbound suburban trains heading for Moorgate. These views were taken on the last day, with a handful of enthusiasts waiting to travel on the final regular DMU to the city. En route, it called at the remaining part of the original Metropolitan station at King's Cross, since rebuilt and now known as King's Cross Thameslink. Trains from Finsbury Park and beyond now journey to Moorgate by way of the Great Northern and City Line. Back to York Road now, in torrential rain, to witness the arrival and departure of a farewell rail tour formed of blue Mark I suburban stock, headed by a Class 31 brush diesel. Cubit's 1852 frontage of King's Cross is seen here in the 1960s. Scenes at King's Cross in the 1950s were vastly different to the present day, with N2s reigning supreme on suburban workings. As previously mentioned, southbound trains for the widened lines used York Road Station, but those travelling northwards called at this platform on the opposite side of the terminus. To reach it, they had to negotiate a section of line known as the Hotel Curve, a part of which was built on a severe gradient of 1 in 35. In 1935, the LPTB announced that they would take over the Northern Heights lines. There would be a new connection from the Northern City Line at Finsbury Park and another from what is now Archway to Highgate. Underground trains would run over ex-LNER metals to Alexandra Palace, High Barnet and Edgware, together with a new extension to Bushy Heath, but the war intervened and only the sections to High Barnet and Mill Hill East were completed, leaving Edgware with just its existing underground route and the remainder to eventually fall into disuse. With traffic at a very low ebb, the decision was taken to close the Alexandra Palace branch completely. These scenes, filmed at Highgate and Alexandra Palace not long before closure, show the two-car push-pull set which shuffled back and forth from Finsbury Park in the hands of an ex-LNER N7062 tank of Great Eastern design. As can be seen, the LT cabling was already in position, waiting for the tube trains which never came. Final services ran on Saturday, 3rd of July 1954, with crowds turning out at Alexandra Palace to see the last train depart. To cope with all the additional passengers, an 8-car train was used, and this is seen here behind N2, number 69519. For a few years after closure to passengers, the track was retained for freight traffic. On 5th of May 1956, the branch was visited by this rail tour. It was organised by the Locomotive Club of Great Britain and had started from Broad Street. Here we see N2 number 69506 running round its train at Alexandra Palace. The siding on the right was used by wagons which brought in coal for the palace heating system. Whilst at the station, passengers from the tour had ample time to generally explore and look around the old signal box. Here we see a general panoramic view of the approach tracks, with the station's island platform in the middle distance and the huge palace building looming up behind. With a view from the window of the returning rail tour, we move on to 1962 to see how the branch had weathered its years of closure. Firstly, we see Alexandra Palace, where the street-level building was more or less intact and still retained its canopy balancing. Things had changed around the back, however, with the former platform side being used for car auctions. The more intrepid explorer could still find items of railway interest, however, such as this cast iron trespass sign and the former signal box. As can be seen, this was reasonably intact externally, although it had become very derelict and had been stripped of its equipment. Inside the box was found an old working notice which provided a reminder of the line in happier days. Muswell Hill Station lost its buildings around 1960. Everywhere were reminders of the aborted underground extension, ranging from this unused substation to lesser and more mundane relics. The 1902 built station at Cranley Gardens continued to stand and even had the remains of an underground map still clinging to its booking office wall. At track level, the buildings on the upside remained virtually intact, but their opposite number had been badly burnt by vandals. The signal box was also very derelict, but at least it was recorded on film. With a general view towards Muswell Hill, we say goodbye to Cranley Gardens and continue up the line, which still retained much of its LT cabling. (1938) tube stock is seen here at Highgate Wood siding, with the formation of the branch veering off to the right. The tracks east of Park Junction were retained for freight traffic and LT stock transfers. Highgate Station was rebuilt between 1940 and 41 in a modern LPTB style, but of course it was never served by tube trains. Here, an N2 passes on a coal train in the early 60s. Highgate remained in a time warp, with 1954 posters still on display and ample evidence of former LT involvement. Tube trains reached East Finchley in July 1939 when the new line from Archway was opened. The station was rebuilt with 2 island platforms, although only the outer faces saw regular use, as the centre roads were intended for trains to and from Finsbury Park. Beside the line can be seen Eric Ormonier's Archer firing a symbolic speedy arrow towards central London. The Northern Line was extended to High Barnet in April 1940, and Finchley Church End Station was renamed Finchley Central. The line from here to Mill Hill East, over the lofty Dollisbrook Viaduct, also became part of the underground system from May 1941, but wartime conditions halted further progress, and the remainder of the route to Edgware was abandoned, leaving Mill Hill East as the branch terminus. Before the work ceased, a substation, similar to the one seen earlier at Muswell Hill, was constructed at Page Street, but again this was never used and was subsequently demolished. After closure, part of the route was converted into a motorway slip road, whilst elsewhere the track bed was given over to other uses. In 1906, a simple wooden halt was opened at the Hale between Mill Hill and Edgware, and London Transport made a start at rebuilding it into a full station. Having constructed a new section of concrete platform, all work ceased, and today Mill Hill the Hale has returned to nature. This is the course of the old GN line outside Edgware, showing the close proximity of the LT tracks from Golders Green. The former Great Northern terminus was last used by passenger trains in 1939, but retained for freight until 1964, when it was abandoned. The goods shed remained standing, together with a section of platform, but by the time this film was taken, the old passenger building, which stood at the country end, had been completely demolished. Just south of Edgware, there is still ample evidence of the abandoned new work scheme. These concrete abutments were constructed as part of the necessary track modifications. Until September 1970, LT stock was transferred between the Northern City Line and Highgate Depot by way of Finsbury Park, and as the route had not been electrified, a battery loco had to be used. Having passed through Finsbury Park Station, one of these workings is seen on the bridge which crossed the main line. These trains ran weekly and presented a poignant sight, trundling over a line which, had it not been for the intervention of the Second World War, would no doubt be part of the LT system today. Highgate Station slumbers on, with its vision of a bright future lost in the sands of time. Stairs lead to the underground station below, but no footsteps can be heard in the eerie quietness. A single building from the original 1867 structure still survives and is now a private house. The tunnels now lie silent, whilst the nearby LT cable runs have been left to rot. Park Junction signal box, rebuilt in 1939, lay derelict until 1995, but has now been demolished. Highgate Depot has since reopened. The huge bulk of Alexandra Palace still dominates its surroundings and overshadows the former branch terminus, which has since found use as a community centre, although nothing now remains at track level. The palace building itself was gutted by fire for the second time in its existence during July 1980, but it has since been repaired and restored. The most notable remains of the aborted extension to Bushy Heath are parts of an unfinished viaduct at Brockley Hill and the now closed Auden and Bus Works, which was originally intended as an underground depot. We now move to Fenchurch Street, where we see an ex-LMS 264 tank departing in the 1950s. Travelling from the terminus some years later, we see the signal box demolished in 1994 and the remains of the Midlands City Goods Depot. We then pass the derelict up platform of Lemon Street Station, closed in 1941 and virtually eradicated during the construction of the Docklands Light Railway. At Stepney East, the line to Blackwall diverges to the right. This closed to passengers in 1926, but has now been incorporated as part of the Docklands Light Railway. Since 1987, Stepney East has been known as Limehouse. Having passed Salmons Lane Junction and the erstwhile Limehouse Curve, we come to the site of Burdett Road Station, closed after extensive bomb damage in 1941 and since obliterated. At Gas Factory Junction, the LTS line veers off to the right, but we continue to the left and head towards Stratford through the disused station at Bow Road. This line was to be included in the Shenfield electrification scheme and would have had a shuttle service between Stratford and Fenchurch Street. However, the idea was abandoned and the route, together with Bow Road Station, closed in November 1949. This film was taken in 1966, about a year before the platform buildings were demolished, and not surprisingly, considering their period of disuse, they had become very derelict. At Stratford, we pass one of the unused bays intended for the shuttle. This was platform 7, but the other bay, platform 4, is now served by the DLR. We now move to the North Woolwich line during the 1970s to see a Craven's DMU pass the remains of Stratford Market Station, which closed in 1957. Here we see a similar unit departing from Canning Town. This station closed in 1994 and has been replaced by a new island platform further south. The North London Railway proper had its city terminus at Broad Street. This film was taken in the late 70s and shows part of the line as it was then. Broad Street had become a sad-looking place, having lost much of its track and overall roof. It was hopelessly too large for its surviving services and closed in 1986 when its site was required for the new Broadgate office development. This is Shoreditch Station, which closed in 1940 but remained reasonably intact until the mid-60s. The route then passed Haggerston and Alston Junction before coming to Mildmay Park, where the station, which closed in 1934, retained its street-level building until 1987. The next station beyond Mildmay Park is Canonbury, and here we see film taken in 1956 showing the units then used on Broad Street Richmond services. The North London line to Poplar lost its passenger trains in 1944, and here we see the remains of South Bromley Station. The route, which is now used by the Docklands Light Railway, continues in cutting to the site of the badly bombed Poplar Station, which has since been redeveloped by the DLR as All Saints. Southeast of Poplar was situated the large expanse of sidings known as Harrow Lane. In 1956, the LCGB tour, which we met earlier at Alexandra Palace, visited Harrow Lane, and passengers had the chance to examine the ex-Midland West India Dock Shunter BEL number 1, which was standing near Bank Signal Box. Here we see the stock being shunted into the former station at Millwall Junction by North London 060 tank number 58859. At Millwall Junction, the North London tank came off and was replaced by Ginty number 47484. Until closure in 1926, it was here that passengers from Fenchurch Street would change onto the North Greenwich branch. The station building and start of the branch can be seen to the right of the loco. Moving on to South London, we see a train leave Lordship Lane Station and head towards Crescent Wood Tunnel on the Crystal Palace High Level branch, which closed in September 1954. At the other end of the tunnel stood the station at Upper Sydney, arriving. The branch terminus was a huge cavernous place which had clearly witnessed better days. The nearby Crystal Palace itself, seen here in earlier years, was destroyed by fire in 1936 and subsequently demolished. To connect the palace to the high-level station, an ornate subway was constructed beneath Crystal Palace Parade. It still survives to this day and is sometimes open to the public. The brick retaining wall alongside the station site still survives, as do the line's two tunnels. This one was named Paxton Tunnel, after the man who built the palace itself. Nowadays, this is the only loco to be seen at Crystal Palace High Level. Closures of southern electrified lines have been rare, but another, more recent casualty was the route between Woodside and Selsdon, which lost its services in 1983. Here we see the view from a train leaving Woodside, passing the signal box, which was abolished in June 1984. The line was never really a success, having closed once before at the beginning of 1917. Electrification and reopening by the Southern in 1935 promised a bright future, but it failed to make the grade. Bingham Road Station replaced an earlier halt of the same name and was built by the Southern Railway. In its final days, it was a sad, desolate place, covered in graffiti which was seemingly aimed at the few remaining commuters. Beyond Bingham Road, the line entered a cutting before reaching three adjoining tunnels on the approach to Coombe Road. The station had started life as Coombe Lane in 1885, but received its new name when rebuilt and reopened by the Southern in 1935. Latterly, the service only ran during peak hours, but as can be seen with this 2 EPB arriving from Woodside, the trains were scarcely crowded. A halt once occupied this site at Spencer Road, but it closed in March 1915 and was never reinstated. Selsdon was probably the last station in Greater London to remain gaslit. It served a junction and once boasted 4 platform faces, but the 2 on the line from South Croydon closed in 1959. In the end, the only original building to survive was the signal box. A little hut existed for the issue of tickets, but this invariably remained unstaffed. Enthusiasts gathered on the line during the last day, and a photographer filmed a final journey past Spencer Road. Enthusiasts were also seen at Bingham Road, recording one of the final up trains. The last train of all, the 1930 ex-Sanderstead, is seen leaving Selsdon on Friday, 13th of May, 1983. With a final run through the tunnels near Coombe Road, we bid farewell to the Woodside Selsdon line and moved to another South London byway. Merton Park was once a junction station, serving the Wimbledon-West Croydon line, as shown here, together with the loop to Tooting via Merton Abbey, which closed to passengers in 1929. Part of the route remained in use for freight until 1975, and in April 1958, Merton Abbey Station was visited by this rail tour, worked by H-Class 044 tank number 31521. On its journey through suburbia, number 31521 made this spirited run past Mitcham Junction. Another interesting tour of the late 1950s was the Thamesider, which employed M7-044 tank number 30050 and a two-car push-pull set. It is seen here leaving Clapham Junction and travelling over the West London line through Kensington Olympia. This is South Acton, which, although still open today, has changed greatly in appearance. We leave the Thamesider after passing Bollow Lane Junction Box and seeing an LMR electric train en route from Richmond to Broad Street. Elton Park Station on the Bexley Heath line opened as Shooter's Hill in 1908 and received its later name in 1927. It closed in 1985 following the construction of a new Eltham station, which replaced both this and Eltham Well Hall when the site of the latter was required for roadworks. From the southern region we move to the western and catch a glimpse of Ealing Broadway in the 1950s with steam-hauled suburban trains and standard tube stock in the adjoining LT platform. Beyond Ealing we stray slightly outside the Greater London boundary for these 1950s views of an ex-GWR rail car on the Staines West branch, which lost its passenger services in March 1965. We now take a quick look at Marlborough Road station on the Metropolitan, which closed in 1939 when the new Bakerloo line station at St John's Wood was opened nearby. Still on the Metropolitan, we return to Aldersgate and Barbican to see electric loco number 8 entering the station while still in wartime grey livery. Down Street Station was opened by the Great Northern Piccadilly and Brompton Railway in 1907 and closed in 1932. Here we see a group of enthusiasts visiting the station in 1993. After closure, the lifts were removed, but a shaft was retained for ventilation. Down below, a few signs remain in the tile work. All that was visible of the name panels was this short section. A typical feature of Yerke's tube stations were rings of different coloured tiling following the shape of the tunnel. the early days of the Second World War, Down Street was used as headquarters of the Railway Executive Committee and Churchill's War Cabinet, and all amenities were of course provided. Back down to the remains of the platforms now, as trains hurry by. One passing train is specially stopped and takes our party back to Green Park. This is Holborn Viaduct Station, which in its final days was one of London's quietest termini. It opened in 1874, but closed in 1990 when services were diverted via the newly renovated Snow Hill route, as mentioned earlier in this video. These scenes showed the station shortly before closure, whilst preliminary demolition was taking place. As usual these days, archaeologists were allowed on the site to look for ancient remains. This is Ludgate Hill Bridge, which we encountered earlier. As the low-level route was to be in tunnel, various utilities had to be moved. Here we see the new station, initially called St Paul's Thameslink, under construction. A few days before the final closure of Holborn Viaduct, we return for a final look and witness a historic station's twilight hours. The most recent London tube station to close was Aldwych. The street-level entrance occupied the site of the old Royal Strand Theatre and included some nice vintage tiling. It closed in 1994 when the cost of renewing the lifts was deemed to be too high in comparison to the numbers then using the station. The station was never very successful, and in 1922 the booking office closed and was replaced by issuing facilities in the lift. It was latterly served by a 3-car shuttle service to and from Holborn. The station opened in 1907, but the tiling of its walls was never completed, and the Holborn end of its platforms remained like this to the end. This is the machine room which operated the station lifts. Although normally open in peak hours only, one Saturday a few years ago, An enthusiast day was held when the public had the opportunity to ride on the new prototype tube trains. The station's name was originally Strand, but this changed to Aldwych in 1915. We now take a trip to Holborn on one of the prototype trains. At Holborn we see the branch platform, which still retained its original Yerkes tiling. Back now to Aldwych, with some confusing Jubilee line destinations on display inside the train. Other unusual workings could occasionally be seen, such as this track recording train passing the branch platform at Holborn. This is a glimpse of the inside of the mysterious track recording train. We move to September 1993 for an enthusiast visit to Aldwych and a detailed look around the station. Behind locked doors could be found the other platform, little used after 1912 and closed completely in 1917. In later years it was used for trying out different lighting and decor schemes for other parts of the system. A walk was made along the disused second tunnel towards Holborn, where a train can be seen near the site of a former crossover. Back now to the surviving Aldwych platform to witness the arrival of a train. The group joined the train and then travelled to Holborn. This is the disused branch platform at Holborn, which has long since been converted for other purposes. Here, Aldwych-bound trains pass the site of the former crossover at Holborn. The final day came on Friday, 30th of September 1994. This is Aldwych Station on its last night, with enthusiasts waiting for the final public train. The station signs had already been removed. Back over the former crossover near Holborn for the last time, and then into the station. The party is over now, and the curtain has fallen on another chapter of London railway history. If you have enjoyed this video, you will certainly be interested in the London Railway Record. It is the only magazine devoted to the history of railways in Greater London and is published quarterly. It costs £2 per copy and is available from all good railway bookshops or direct from the publishers, Connor and Butler, at 69 Guildford Road, Colchester, Essex, CO1 2RZ. Online also make other London videotapes, featuring 4 volumes of underground trains, trams and trolleybuses in 2 volumes each, and a tape on buses. These are available from all good shops.